I'm just going to hand over to Tanya for this first session to tell us about cultural maturity and why it's important. Thank you.
Very much, Jamie, and thank you, Dan, for not stealing all of my thunder and taking my slides this morning. Good morning, all. So my viewpoint is road safety specific, but I think it will be aligning a lot with what we're going to hear throughout the rest of the day. But let's start off with unpicking what cultural maturity is and why it's important to the safe system approach, particularly in road transport safety. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So this is a quote from an article we wrote with representatives from the International Transport Forum and the Asian Development Bank. And I'm really pleased to see that actually one of our co-authors, Martin Small, is joining us today from Australia. Now, as you can see here, we're looking at how the number of deaths and injuries on our roads are a reflection of the knowledge, skills, experience, and will that are present within the management of the system. These organisations, International Transport Forum and the Asian Development, like Agilysis, have been trying to find ways of how we measure these things in terms of knowledge, skills, experience, and will in the implementation of safe system. Because if we understand what those standards are, those levels are, we'll know how mature we are in the implementation of safety. For Agilysis, we think the culture, as Dan has just been explaining, is really key to helping authorities move to creating the safe system. So I'd like to spend the next 15 minutes explaining why. If we go to the next slide, please. So there isn't actually a single definition of organisational culture, nor is there one for safety culture. Although Cooper in 2000 defined it as consisting of these three elements. Organisations have common internal characteristics which represent who and what they are, what they find important, and how they approach activities. These define their organisational culture. So a safety culture is a specific type of culture where safety is given priority by the organisation's members. It reflects the attitudes and values of the people within the organisation, the systems that they have in place, and the behaviour exhibited by its members. Now, as we know, the safe system requires those in road safety to think differently about their role, about their activities, and who they collaborate with and how. And so the culture of the organisation will clearly influence how well safe system is adopted. Next slide, please. So to begin, I'd like to give a little bit of context of why we think this is important. We've been working with many road safety partnerships, regional and subnational and national authorities over the last 5 years to help them with their strategic approach to road safety. Because it's one thing to create and sign up to a road safety strategy that takes the safe system approach, but that really doesn't mean that it will necessarily translate into a change in practice. Safe system application requires input from multiple actors and stakeholders, both within organisations, but also amongst their partners. And therefore, determining the levels of understanding and commitment to safe system thinking will highlight where we need training or support or investment in order to strengthen the work of these organisations. And so this is the starting point of our work in this sphere. And we were commissioned by National Highways to explore how safe system readiness could be measured. And it really has grown from there. Next slide. So whilst it might not be straightforward to implement the safe, why might it not be straightforward to implement the safe system? Actually, we can learn some lessons from countries who have moved further down the road to safe system implementation. And I think I saw a question from Margaret on this already in the chat. This is some work from TRL for, again, National Highways from 2021 that looked at some of the implementation challenges of safe system. They include having a lack of vision for what the road network needs to look like in 2040 or 2050, whenever they're seeking to achieve zero. They have leaders who are uninformed or overly cautious or reactive. That there's a lack of coordination on implementation within and across responsible agencies. That there's a lack of coordination around data and the length of time needed to evaluate. The practitioners are disempowered, they lack time and flexibility to try new approaches, and they lack safe system knowledge and skills. And actually that new knowledge takes time to filter down and embed into practice. And also that road safety risks, especially speed, are not obvious to road users. And lastly, that intuitive interventions are often not the most effective. So this leads to investment in ineffective interventions to kind of appease the public. We think a healthy culture could help to address some of these. Next slide. So as I said, we were commissioned by National Highways to explore how we could measure the cultural readiness of an organisation in implementing the SAFE system. But how do we define maturity? Next slide. So for this element, we reviewed 11 cultural maturity models and their application used in a range of industries, including occupational health, coal and mining, human resources, and management. And I'm sure you'll hear more about these throughout today. On the next slide, we'll see that Hudson and Parker's Hearts and Minds model is the most utilised model, actually, that we found in that review. And it had already been used by National Highways to measure health and safety culture. And in fact, I saw that the model was included on the website for this event today. Now, this model relates values to behaviour with underlying beliefs and beliefs about barriers influencing behaviour. And motivation is seen as a driving force for behaviour. So what we have is the beliefs, values and motivations of an individual being shaped by the characteristics of the organisation to which they belong. The Hearts and Minds model sets out 5 stages of cultural maturity, where organisations can become more mature as their safety culture improves. As you can see here, we start down at the pathological. We don't care as long as we don't get caught. And we go right the way through, right to the top, where this is how we do business. Next slide. So why is this important to the SAFE system? Well, if we go on to the next slide, we'll see actually what we wanted to do was make sure we were clear on what the SAFE system is before trying to determine how to measure implementation of it. So many of these manuals and guides will be familiar to some of you. They include international publications, setting out guidance as to how to apply SAFE system approaches. We reviewed these 16 manuals and synthesized the actions they recommend. So there were 100 actions identified in total, and 48 of these were most frequently cited. We then held a workshop of UK road safety experts to review the applicability of these 48, because we needed to know what actions we ought to be measuring if we were going to determine the maturity of an organisation. If we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of remind us all what the SAFE system model looks like. This is our synthesis of many models from across the world. What we need to do is have these acceptance of these principles at the heart of the SAFE system if we're going to deliver it. So when we're thinking about cultural beliefs, these are it for the SAFE system. The acceptance that people make mistakes and that death and serious injury are unacceptable are probably the key too. If we go on to the next slide, many of you will be familiar with the domains in which we deliver the SAFE system. So these are the collective efforts required across the domains in order to eliminate death and serious injury. And this is where partnership working and collaboration really comes to the fore. No one organisation can deliver all of these on their own. But on the next slide, I think is actually possibly the key to unlocking cultural maturity, because this is how we do SAFE system. And it goes far beyond the 3 E's in the bottom left of this outer ring. What we did was we looked at the 48 actions identified from those manuals and specified the mechanisms of change required to deliver them. So we took 4 well-known SAFE system models and synthesized the mechanisms set out in their outer circles. And then we grouped the 48 actions. So each one of them belongs to one of these. If we go to the next slide, please. We also felt that we needed a mechanism to link SAFE system approaches to cultural maturity, because actually we're going to have to behave differently within our organizations as individuals. And so, yeah, we needed a behavior change model. So this is the ISM, and it's a behaviour change model developed by for the Scottish Government, and explains that people's behaviour is influenced by 3 different contexts: the individual, social and material. And if you could just click for me, wonderful, thank you. The individual contains the values, beliefs, attitudes, skills, emotions, habits, costs and benefits and agencies of the individuals within an organisation. Then we have the social sphere, the norms and leaders, the roles, the institutions and relationships in the social context in which people behave. And then the material includes the rules and regulations of these institutions and the resources available to it. With all of these organisations, we'd be able to see how, ingredients, we'd be able to see how SAFE system cultural maturity could be improved. So if we move forward, and you could probably click through to the next slide, here we have is the Safe System Cultural Maturity model, which uses the principles of the ISM and the Safe System to understand the influences that could move an organisation to becoming more mature. So in the centre, we have the attitudes, beliefs, values, rules, and all of the ways in which people behave within the organisation. And then we have the organisational influences themselves. Do they use safe system language? Do they have safe system specific roles? And then we have the operators in the outside of the circle here, the way in which we deliver safe system. Are these mechanisms being used? So moving on, how do we know where an organisation is and where they could get to? So on the next slide, we created a question set which brought all of these elements together so we could test those beliefs, languages and actions related to the safe system imperatives and the components. We could see whether or not these actions are being delivered. So it's a diagnostic tool. We can understand where a culture, the safe system culture of an organisation is right now. We can also compare between different organisations, and we can help them to transform. So by highlighting strengths and weaknesses, we can allow organisations to move forward. And finally, it's evaluative. So we can see progression or regression indeed over time in an organisation's journey to safe system cultural maturity. So we created some questions which are on this next slide, and each question, there are 22 of them, belongs to a safe system component and a change mechanism. And what we do here is there are 5 statements, and individuals within an organisation are asked to select the response which most closely represents their organisation's position right now. The concept here is that people across the organisation participate in it so we can understand what practitioners are thinking in comparison to leaders to understand how well embedded the safe system culture is. So looking at the next slide, we've defined the safe system cultural maturity at our 5 stages, from vulnerable, where there is no safe system culture, right through to advanced, where safe system is at the heart of the organisational culture. And as Dan showed, there is a chart where we can show, which is on the next slide, please. We can show the results where, and this is an example, where we can show where organisations are more or less mature. So, for example, with this one, safe vehicles and post-collision response are both scored in the vulnerable category. Now, whilst these might not be domains that is the primary responsibility of this particular organisation, we do all have a part to play, and so there will be actions that this organisation could take to develop in these areas. So by identifying and acknowledging the role that this organisation can play, we can convince leadership to contribute, we can identify partners to collaborate with, and we can change attitudes about the importance of these actions. So just to finish up, and we should be hearing more about this later today from George Henry, we can actually identify ways to help organisations become more mature. So we've now been working with Transport Scotland on the creation of a cultural maturity playbook. So we're just moving away from the detail of the road safety actions here to thinking about how an organisation can use language, practices, roles and imagery to embed safe system thinking in the way in which things are done. And so just my final slide, just to finish up, so we think becoming more mature in our safe system culture is key to changing how we approach road safety in the UK. The safe system is not just something that we do or say, it's something that we truly believe in and have embedded into all of our actions. Today, we're going to hear from other transport sectors on how safety is at the heart of everything we do. Let's see what we can learn so that we can all embed safe system beliefs and values across our organisations to make a difference in road safety. Thank you.